Hey everybody, it's Dave here and Darren over there. We are your two old bloggers. Been commenting publicly on the Minnesota Vikings for over 2 decades apiece. And we're going to do it again today. This time, we're going to look at the philosophy, getting deep here, of trading up, trading down, staying put, or what Kwesi might do the end of this month for the 2023 NFL Draft. We have two themes today. First one discusses just that, the trade, which way to go. Second one, that we've already made a pick this season. You wonder who? You'll have to wait and find out next on Two Old Bloggers. Vikings First and Skol presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey everybody, it's Dave here once again and Darren over there from the Great White North. How are things in your part of the world, Darren?
Just peachy, Dave. Starting to warm up here. All kinds of melting of snow and lots of puddles, and you get to see all the garbage that people don't put in their garbage cans and just kind of throw out in the streets this time of the year. It's lovely.
Don't understand that, especially when you live near places that have critters that like to scavenge said garbage.
Yeah, well, the foxes love it around here.
Well, I bet the big white fuzzy ones do too. Anyways, we're here this week. It is April 8th. We are less than 3 weeks away from the NFL Draft. The Minnesota Vikings have 5 picks. As of right now, just 5. Question is, what is Kwesi going to do about it? Now, when we all take a step back 5-10 years from now and evaluate whether Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was a good GM or a bad GM or a great GM, we're going to ask ourselves a few questions. And the first ones we're going to come up with is, did he find that QB, that quarterback, right? We know that seems to be a key to getting to the Super Bowl for 98% of the teams. Did he find that quarterback? Second, did he stay ahead of the needs curve? Every team this time of year has some sort of need. But is the team coming into the draft with, hey, we're building for the future, so we're looking at guys that we're going to need 2 and 3 years out? Or are they looking for guys that, hey, we need to fill these holes right now or we can't compete at all? Is he ahead on that? There are a few select teams in the league that are ahead on that needs curve, and things come up. Players get hurt, knee blown up. They may get in a car accident, shot in the leg at a nightclub, something like that,
Yeah.
that happen. So you have to have needs, but was he ahead of the needs curve across his career, right? It's just starting, so we don't know, but that's a good point of reference. Are the Vikings ahead of the needs curve right now? Oh, that's argumentatively a flat out no way. They need a lot of stuff, and we're going to get into that. But this is, if you want to take the constraints on Kwesi last year, right, of the Wilfs saying, nope, we're going to run it all back to see if it's the coaches or if it's the players. And they did that, and they did well. Hey, Winning 13 games was amazing with a rookie head coach. But with that sort of squad, are they going to take advances this season? And we've got to find out. And I just gave you 2 criteria that I think needs to be to make a great GM. Can he find that quarterback? And can he stay ahead of the needs curve? And if he stays ahead of the needs curve, those generally turn into wins and championships. And we all want those championships. So let's start off with the first theme to see how this year he starts to get ahead so that in 5 or 10 years, we could say Kwesi was a great GM. Theme 1, first off, let's start off with the title. You see Kwesi on there. I wanted to focus on him because, hey, GM's in charge of the trade, so we'll look there. And but we talked about Minnesota Vikings, and do we believe the 2023 pick options? What do we think they're going to do, and why trading down may be the best option? We'll explain why. You titled this one, Trade Up, Trade Down, or Stay Put.
I did, Dave, because I guess when, of course, like you said, 3 weeks from the draft, we've been talking, that's going to be the focus for all Viking fans right now and all football fans, really, with free agency into the first wave being over and a lot of teams locking up a lot of major guys in free agency. But yeah, so you're going to focus on the draft, and that's what we're going to do here on Two Old Bloggers here over the next 3 weeks, really focus on that. And I think, but one of the topics that I wanted to get at right away was the Vikings right now with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. You're at number 23. That's what the Vikings have. But of course, there's lots of discussion right now about what's the best route for the Vikings to go. Should they stay put at 23? Is trading up an option? You've been hearing some rumblings about the Vikings might be doing that, or is trading down the best way to go? And I think there's actually 4 options going into the draft, but one of those options is you trade some of your draft picks for like an established stud, like the Vikings did in 2008 to get Jared Allen. They gave up a first and a third in 2008 to do that because they had a big need at defensive end. But if the Vikings, I don't think that that's an option that we're going to take. I think the Vikings would have already done that now. And really what's the position they'd most likely, there's a lot of positions they could go at right now that you'd look to address. So I don't think like the trading for an established player and giving up draft picks is one of our options that's on the table right now. But the three that I do think are, do you stay at 23? Do you trade up, as I said, and get up to earlier in the draft, or do you trade down and try to accumulate draft picks? And I think the best option for a team really is dependent on what's the current state of that franchise. Mm-hmm. When you look at trading up into the draft, higher into the draft, than if the Vikings were to do that, teams that do that typically, I think that gives them, in theory, it gives them a better chance to get an impact player, like a high level generation talent, because you're getting up and, inside the top 10 possibly. Or the top 5, or like the Panthers did, you get your number 1 pick overall. But I think that really works well for a team if there's 3 things in place with that team. One is you've got a lot of, you've got a lot of draft picks right now. And so if you trade a bunch of them to move up in the draft, it's not going to really destroy your draft capital this year or next year.
Now, to clarify, we're talking about teams that have this, that are in a position to trade up.
Yep. So that's one thing that makes this a good option for a team. You got a lot of draft picks. You can afford to draft some of them. And again, it's not going to submarine your ability to add younger, cheaper talent in in the draft. I think the second thing is that if your team that's already got a very deep, strong roster, so that again, you've got good depth, you've got good starters,
You're
and
ahead of
again, if
that curve. Yep.
you're ahead of that curve, and you've got the ability to, if you give up a couple of draft picks this year and next year, and maybe an established player, that's not going to. You've got people. You've got people ready to go to either step in for starters or supplement the starters if they get injured. And again, losing those draft picks isn't going to really hamper your roster building process and the ability to add cheap young talent that a lot of teams need, because you've already got a lot of that in place because you have a strong roster.
And that's where we want to eventually be.
That's where we want to eventually be. And I think, the other thing is that you've got, I think if a team wants to look to trade up, I think they've got the strong roster, they've got the ample draft capital to do it. And then the other thing is that they have maybe one position where they really, really have a big need. And if they fill that position with an impact player, that can really improve their chances of being a Super Bowl contender, playoff contender. This one example would have been the Bills in when they made the Stephon Diggs trade. Now they didn't move up in the draft, but they had a big need at wide receiver. They had a very good defense, great quarterback, lots of strength all over the roster, but they really didn't have like that impact wide receiver. So they traded draft picks, a lot of them, to get one. Now they didn't go move up in the draft, but sometimes that's the option that you take.
Well, and
you think you can get that CJ Stroud or that Will Anderson, that top 5 guy, and you're willing to give up draft picks because you've got a big need at edge or at quarterback. And if you get that kid, that can really set you up this year and in future years to really be a Super Bowl contender.
And when you opened up the show talking about how we did that for Jared Allen, right? The Bills did it with Diggsy. We did it with Jared Allen, thinking that was the next step. And, of course, it turned out not to be, because any of our trades that we made up, even though they brought us good players, have never taken us to that next step yet. But we're working on it. So
we are working on it. So those are, I think, are the three things that make trading up for a team in the draft the right thing to do. Now I don't think the Vikings are there yet. You've already got into that, basically because they don't have a lot of draft picks to give away right now. They don't really have a strong, deep roster. They got a top heavy roster. That's some good players at the starting level, but not that deep roster that you can afford to. I think that they can afford to give away some draft picks now and not get those younger, cheaper guys that could come in and replace some of the aging veterans in the next year or two. And the other thing is that I don't think that there's one particular position right now that the Vikings have where if they added a guy that has like a key, if they added up a rookie who really makes a Micah Parsons kind of impact, I don't think that's going to significantly make us make us significantly better, that we become a serious Super Bowl contender and are really a threat to beat the Chiefs or the 49ers or one of those top teams right now, unfortunately. So I don't think that for the Vikings right now, trading up, I don't like that idea. I don't think it's a good time for them to do that. You've been hearing things about how, some of the draft prognosticators talking about how they got to make a move at quarterback and Will Levis is falling and the Vikings are going to trade up to get him. Well, again, I don't think we've got the draft capital right now to do that. I don't think we've got the roster that's a good idea to do so. And also, when you look at quarterbacks, Levis would be the fourth best quarterback in this draft, outside of Stroud, Young, and Anthony Richardson. And he's got a lot of questions about him. And if you look at quarterbacks every year, out of the top 8 or 9 guys, maybe one hits typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's literally a crapshoot. And in the first round, I think the numbers are 47% become adequate quarterbacks in the NFL, and that's just he's starter capable. It doesn't mean he's good. It just means he's starter capable in the NFL, and that's less than 50%. The rest are busts. The when you come to extremely good top cream of the crop to take you to Super Bowls, that percentage goes way down, almost to nothing. So you'd put, I wanted to get into, you've talked about, would moving up to take an all-pro player make a difference with this current roster?
Well, I just think that, like when I look at the defense in particular, Dave, like with one player who had, like I said, a Micah Parsons influence on the defense, would that really allow us, if we traded up a bunch of picks and got that player, would that make us a Super Bowl contender next year and beyond? I'm not really convinced about that, just because there's so many areas on the defense where the Vikings need help. They need help at inside linebacker. They need help at corner. Eventually, they're going to need help at safety, even edge rusher, depending on what they do there in the interior on the defensive line. So I think you
And
need
we can
multiple.
talk about interior on offensive line too, if we wanted to.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think defense, to get them from the 31st ranked unit in the league last year to something in like a 15 to top 10 unit, you'd have to get add 4 or 5 impact players to what we have now, and I think a lot of some of that's got to come from the draft. One guy is not going to. It'd be a good start, but that's not going to solve everything for you. Which is why I don't like the idea of trading a bunch of. Like, I just don't think that would get us over the hump, even
Now,
close.
this is where I wanted to disagree with you. I agree with you on every position except for one. Kicker. No, just kidding. No. Quarterback. If the Vikings wish to go for a quarterback, I put these two guys up. They played in the Super Bowl last year. You talk about all-pro players. I went back and looked at the all-pro lists for the last 20 years. Now, last year, Pat Mahomes was AP number 1 QB. AP team number 2 all-pro was Jalen Hurts, right? They met in the Super Bowl. Now, that doesn't happen every single season where number 1 meets number 2. It doesn't. But when you look at it and you look at all the AP number 1 quarterbacks over the last 20 years, I think all of them, except for one, have a Super Bowl ring. And the one that doesn't is Josh Allen. And we fully expect him to get one eventually because he's that good. But you had the likes of Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, just tons of them that all had Super Bowl wins. If you can find that guy, I think that makes it worth it in the long run. If we say, this is just a fictitious dream of mine, we suddenly get the draft capital via trade of Dalvin Cook, Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, whomever, right? And we move up to the number 3 slot and take Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson turns out to be that guy. And it may cost us a first next year, a first the year after, or whatever it is, right? Plus, say, Danielle Hunter. If we turn around and look at it, if AR-15 led us to the Super Bowl, within the next 5 years, we'd be like, what? That was worth it.
Oh, yes.
But that's the only exception to your rule that I see for trading up significantly, right? If we trade up one spot, that's neither here nor there, right? They're going after whatever guy they want, right? But if they trade up significantly, trade up into the top 10 or whatever it is to get that quarterback, or said quarterback, be it Will Levis or Hooker. People were talking about Hendon Hooker all week. You better make sure that's right, and you better hope for it, and you're going to take the shot. So it's going to cost you, but if you hit, it's golden. So that's, like I said, that's the only exception. that I would call out, and I think you're 100% right that trading up for the Vikings this season, unless they go for that QB, is pretty much out of the question.
And and for this year, for me, trading up to get that guy doesn't really appeal to me either because of the reasons why I'm not really convinced that any of these four are going to be the
Or
guy.
that guy.
Like a Richardson, insanely talented, insanely athletic, but lots of concerns from him about his play on the field and his accuracy
Well,
and all
Aaron
those
just
things.
asked it.
And I know that, you love him, but I think if there was a Peyton Manning, well, one thing no team would be trading out of the opportunity to pick him anyway. So that's the thing. So yeah, sometimes you got to take your shot. I don't think this would be the year to take your shot. Staying put, one of the three other options. I think that's a kind of a boring, safe thing for the Vikings to do. Not that it'd be the wrong thing. The Vikings have picked at the 23 spot 3 times in the past 20 years, and the results have been mixed. They picked Darisaw in 2021 at 23. That's looking pretty good. They picked Laquan Treadwell in 2016 at 23. That did not work out very well for the Vikings. We all know that. And then they also got Sharif Floyd in at 23 in 2013, and Floyd was a pretty good player, but just injuries ruined his career.
Injuries and botched surgery. Yep.
Botched surgery. So that's who we've gotten in the past 20 years at 2023. And I think, if you look at the past 20 years, and that's just a sample of 20 years, I kind of cut it off in 2 decades because it gives you a good idea of how, you've got a good sample of players that got picked at 23. But if you look at the guys who've been picked there, there's some good players there, like Brian Balaga, Dwayne Bowe, Riley Reef, guys, Willis McGahee. There's some good, solid players there, but you don't see any generational talent guys that have been picked at 23 for whatever reason in the past 20 years. So you get
I don't know if I put Riley Reef was okay, but nothing spectacular.
Yeah. Nothing spectacular, but he's been a starting left tackle in the league, every starting right left tackle for quite a while. You could do a lot worse. I think he's a good, solid player, but he's not going to be confused with Joe Thomas or Jonathan Ogden or anybody like that. That's kind of who you'd want to get at 23 if you could get him, but there just hasn't been that. You're just as likely to get a Laquan Treadwell in the past 20 years. Teams have been just as likely to get that than they are to get Dee Ford, who's also been selected at 2023. And I think, so, staying put for the Vikings now, hey, if a guy drops, if the guy there that they really like, I think they would pick that guy at 23 if they really like him, if they really think he can be a Justin Jefferson kind of dude for them. But
say if Witherspoon, for some ungodly reason, cornerback, fell at 23, you rush up to the podium and you take him.
Yeah, you do. But with the way the Vikings are right now, if you do that, it doesn't. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is still probably going to trade in the 3rd round and the 4th round, and he'll move around. But it might make it a little bit more difficult for us to get that 2nd round pick that we all seem to like. And we've got that 63 pick gap between when we pick at 23 and when we pick again in the 3rd round. And there's a lot of good players that could go in that range that could help the Vikings, that just even if it's one guy. And with our roster being what it is, I don't like staying at 23 I could live with it, especially if we get a guy like Witherspoon, like you say, somebody who drops, somebody who just is great value at that position. But it's a safe way to go, but I don't think it's the most preferred option for me way to go. The preferred option for me would be trading down. And I think for teams that works out best for them if they're kind of the opposite of the first option. They've got a roster that they don't have a lot of draft picks, so they don't have a lot of draft picks this year to really build that roster building process that you like. They don't have a really deep roster. So trading back to add more draft capital would help you. And also the trading down helps because you need multiple players to really get your roster at the level to be contending for a Super Bowl,
Mm-hmm.
and as opposed to getting that one impact guy who might make that to you. So I think that for the Vikings, particularly when they're up against it on the salary cap too, where they need to be uh, getting these younger, cheaper guys to fill out get the 53 man roster and be able to afford that. I think trading down makes a lot of sense for them this year. You hopefully you could get that second rounder back, and maybe a little bit more. And if you don't have to move back too far, you don't really the players that you're picking at 23 or the players you're picking at 31 or 32 or a little bit later, there isn't a whole a huge amount of difference, a huge gap in that talent, and you could get good value there. I think that would where the Vikings are right now with their roster, with the amount of draft capital they have. I think trading down is the best option for them in this draft. Now, come April 27th, other teams know what the Vikings draft situation is, how many draft picks they've
Mm-hmm.
got. That might hurt Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's leverage and striking the right deal that could get him extra draft capital and the right value. But all you need is one team to really like a player at where the Vikings are picking right now at 23. And it seems like every year there is that team. And I'm certainly, if there's the right deal comes up with what we've seen from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah last year, I think that
Well,
he
he'll
will
do
be,
it.
he'll
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Now, I've got a question, and I think I know the answer. Since this year, round one only has 31 picks, right? And if we trade back and stay within round one, we still get the fifth year option. I wonder if whoever's picking at 32 is going to argue with the league saying that should be a round one pick and should keep the fifth year option, or if the league's just going to say, nope, only 31. You're 32, you're out of luck. That's the first pick of the second round. Um,
Well, that would be, if they did that, they'd be setting a precedent, wouldn't they? That
I think so.
they might not want to do, and the owners might not want to be setting that precedent either.
Well, it's all in how it's written, whether it's the first round gets the top five, or if it's the first 32 picks get it. And I don't know exactly how it's written, but it's interesting to see since there's only 31. So I think trading down as well is the best option. We're limited on picks. We got five, right? As of right now, we have five. We know Kwesi loves to wheel and deal. He traded every single spot last year. He did not stick in any of the assigned spots. He moved up and down last year, both. But he trades, which is cool. I mean, that comes from the Wall Street side of him. You expect him to win on the margins, and he's looking to make advantages trading up and trading down. And he's not afraid to trade within the division. We saw that last season too. It's so I am curious as to what he does this draft, and in 3 weeks we'll know. It'll be Saturday. It'll be day 3. We'll be watching the final portion of that live, and it's going to be interesting to see how many picks he accumulates. How many do you think he's going to get? We're starting at 5. How many do you think he wants minimum? Not
I would
including
say
trades. We'll get into trades here momentarily, but not including trades. Starting at that 5, how much does he want to make that 5 into?
I think he'd be looking to turn 5 into 7 or 8.
Ooh.
Now, and the most likely way to do that, of course, is when you get to the fifth round and the sixth round, you start jockeying around and you get a couple of sixths for trading out of
Mm-hmm.
the fifth, and then use one of those sixths to get a couple of sevens, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think in the back half is where a lot of the movement. It's a you can accumulate some of those 7 or 8 picks, and those extra 2 or 3 picks that I think he'd like to be in the 7 and 8 space. And I think that it's a lot easier to do that later in the rounds too. Again,
Mm-hmm.
because you can there's all kinds of horse trading that goes on there with all the teams at that point. They're a little bit more reluctant to start trading on those first rounders and second rounders, not understandably.
Right, and it's that slide of quality that we've shown numerous times. And I need to bring that graph back up so we can have it ready for the next shows. And the slide is different for whatever position it is. Quarterback may start up way up here. You have a 47% chance of hitting it, and then it goes right, yeah. And then it's down to less than 10% by the time you hit the seventh round. Every position has those. Somebody had mentioned, and I want to thank everybody that's joined us today. First off, you guys have absolutely rocked in the remarks, but they mentioned it depends on the target of the position and what depth range those players are available, right? We know that, say, cornerbacks, there are a top handful that are really good. Witherspoon, there's some other ones. We could throw Banks into that, certain defenders that are really good. And then there's a big chunk that are the second tier that can be good. Not quite sure. They may have deficiencies, but that width of that second tier group is pretty wide, right? So you've got a large selection of that second tier group. So if you're falling into that position where you're in the second tier, you can move around in that big group and still come up with about an equal quality of player, right? Some positions, that second group may be tiny, one or two players, right? Some may not have any at all. And then you go down into the third tier, which are your crapshoots. These guys are special teamers, day three types, and that may be big. You want to play where the depth of the position is available if you're targeting certain positions. And we all know the teams are targeting certain positions because we have needs. We've sat the last however many weeks identifying the needs on the offense and defense that this team has. So they're going to be looking at that, and it's going to play in. Kwesi's going to take that. He's going to run his algorithm or whatever he's doing with his analytics, and he's going, on my best spot. If I do this, if I do A, is to take player B here, right? If that's what they're going for. And it's going to be interesting to see how he works this year's draft. I want to hit up Drew. I think Drew's right. I asked how many players does he want to turn those 5 picks into minimum? Drew said 8. I think 8 is that number. I think that's the key number. We will find out. Aaron just said tight end is strong, but we're good there. Also, dice roll. Yes. The draft is a dice roll in many, many aspects of it. And the further you get down, the more of a draft of a dice roll it is. And, just because we're in day 3 and have 100 picks like Rick Spielman liked, doesn't mean they're any good, right? So you want to get good players and not, hey, I drafted 15 players, this draft. We cut all but 4. Well, you wasted your positions in the draft by doing that. So, to me, you wasted it. Now, if you're just wanting to fill the 90-man roster, that's an expensive way to do it. And I think you miss out on opportunities doing it that way. You can always fill it out with UDFAs. So, it's going to be interesting. Davey calls it Billy Ball philosophy. Scares me. Davey, give it a chance. I think we may actually like it in the long run.
Yeah, and I apologize because once again, screen's pretty fuzzy. I can't really make out the comments, and I think there was a couple that were kind of addressed to me earlier on, but I would have mentioned them, but I couldn't see them. Also, my eyesight's getting worse the older I get. So, but but yeah, I did. I'm all on the right now. It seems the last 3 or 4 drafts I've been all trade down, trade down, trade down. I seem to like that. I don't know whether it's just I'm a hoarder and I want to get as many draft picks as possible. But particularly this year, I think trading down seems like the sensible best option for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and the Vikings, considering where the roster is and what we need to build up that roster both now and in future years.
Mhm.
I don't like only having 5 picks. That's for sure.
Right. It's way too few. I sort of dread night one that we could sit there and get down to
Mm,
23 and he trades out of 23 and night one
yeah,
is nothing but watching everybody else pick and drinking our favorite beverage of choice, and that's that. We'll see you tomorrow for day two of the draft. And
and I think
that's most likely is what's going to happen.
yeah, I think we all should be prepared to be ready for the Vikings not making a selection on Thursday night on April the 27th, and we won't. The only good thing about that is we won't get to see Roger Goodell announce our pick.
I didn't
and
think of that,
but
but you're right.
but yeah, it does when you're waiting all, and in particular for a team like the Vikings who are in the back half of the first round, and you're waiting all night for them to make their pick, and then when it gets to 23 and we don't make the pick, it's a bit of it deflates the joy and the excitement that we've been having, and that even kind of happened last year when we were picking at 14, and then like what? We got to wait until the 32nd pick to find out who the Vikings are going to get. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yogi,
think
I
we got to
agree with
be
you. If
ready for that.
Branch fell to 23, I'd run to the podium. Um,
Mm.
because I think he could be our next nickel. But we shall see. It's going to be fun. We both agree. We think they're going to be trading down to get some more picks, unless they like some quarterback and they think moving up is going to get it. Ryan, you love Roger Goodell. Well, you and maybe his mother. Um,
Oh yeah, I think
we'll see.
Davey's saying he's hoping it could be worse that Ed Marinero could be up there announcing our pick again. So
Well,
that
we'll
that is
see.
also true. That is also true.
We got to remember they're working towards the goal of championships. So it's going to be interesting to see their philosophy this year. Last year, they're a little hamstrung by the Wilfs. I don't think they're going to be as much this year. But that brings us to theme two. When did the 2023 draft actually start?
Well, we give it away with our photo, our graphic there, Dave. But
Mm-hmm.
but we just talked about it. We've talked a million times, I think, over the past couple of months about how the Vikings only have 5 draft picks, and we don't like it. We're a bit worried about that, et cetera, et cetera. And it certainly does pain me, as it pains you, Dave, that those 5 picks that's what we've
Mm-hmm.
got now, when we're used to having 10 or 11 this time of the year, and usually quite a few of them in the early rounds as well. But maybe as a bit of a salve on my wound and other wounds is that uh, when the Vikings, when it's all said and done on the 29th, that Saturday the 29th, and we've made all our picks, whether it's 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or however many it ends up being that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah makes, when you're looking at all those new rookies that the Vikings picked and dreaming about how they're going to turn us into Super Bowl contenders, you need to add one name to that draft list, and that one name is T.J. Hawkinson, because the reason we don't have a second rounder this year is because we traded that and a third rounder next year to get Hawkinson, and that's and in 10 games, T.J. Hawkinson caught 60 passes, 519 yards, and 3 TDs during those 10 games with the Vikings. That's pretty good production from a tight end, particularly from a Vikings tight end. And I think it's important. I wanted to highlight T.J. Hawkinson and that trade, and because I consider him a 2023 draft pick, because we used our draft, one of our draft picks in this draft and next draft to get him. And here's a situation where That's a pretty smart thing to do, I think.
Mhm.
If you look at that production I just talked about, T.J. Hawkinson, he 60 catches, the 500 and some yards. He as soon as upon immediately arriving in Minnesota, Dave, he gave the Vikings a credible and consistent pass catching threat at the tight end position, which Irv Smith Jr. was unable to give us his 4 years with the team. Mind you, he was stuck behind Kyle Rudolph a couple of those years, but still, uh, TJ Hawkinson gave us something in 2022 that we did not have. And if you look at the typical, and that production is much better than you typically get from any second rounder you would pick
Mhm.
in a year. If you look at the Vikings' 2 second-round picks last year, Andrew Booth Jr. and Ed Ingram, well, Andrew Booth Jr., when he played, he didn't play very well, but it was very little, and he was injured the whole year. And Ed Ingram, although we expect him to be much better this year, Ed Ingram, by all measures, was one of the worst starting right guards in the NFL last year.
Mhm.
That's what you got out of your second
But he
rounders
was
last
starting.
year.
He was a starter.
He
He
was a
was better
starter,
than all those non-starters. But
but
yes, he was not.
not not a good starter. TJ Hawkinson was a very good starter for us,
Oh
and
yes.
for you to get that, he was your second rounder, I think,
Hmm.
this year. You can consider him a second round pick, I think, for the Vikings this year. And the best thing about him is that uh, when you trade when you traded for TJ Hawkinson, there was no real doubt about could he play at an NFL level. Yes, he'd already proven that for 3 years.
Hmm.
There was no concern about like how long is it going to take him to adjust to the speed of the game. Will he be able to start right away? How will he do when he starts? That was all pretty well known when the Vikings
Hmm.
traded for him. Unlike what you didn't have to worry about whether he'd come in and be an NFL starter and a good NFL player. You didn't have to wait for an adjustment period to playing in the NFL. All of these things that you would typically have to worry about and wonder about if you picked a second rounder, that was
Well, and
gone
we talked
with
about
TJ
Herb
Hawkinson.
Smith.
Yeah,
We kept waiting for Herb Smith to
we did.
develop and to develop and to develop and to develop. And through injuries and other things, he never did. And he's gone. Um, but with Hawkinson, we knew what we were getting, and he took a step from there. I think Kirk Cousins loved having him in the lineup and as that safety blanket.
You sure did. And even the better part of it is that he'll turn 26 in July, so he's still very young. He has
Mhm.
still got lots of great football ahead of him, I think. And again, you got that for second rounder and a third rounder. You traded for a bona fide NFL player. You traded draft picks that may or may not turn out for pretty much a sure thing.
Mhm.
So to me, again, when we assess the 2023 draft, I think we have to look at the trade that Kwesi Adolphe made last year to get Hawkinson. And again, I consider TJ Hawkinson one of our draft picks this year,
Mhm.
and he's a hell of a draft pick if you look at what he did with the Vikings last year and what I think he's going to do in 2023. He's going to have a bigger impact in 2023 than I think any second rounder we would have drafted in that position. So add TJ Hawkinson to our draft haul in 2023, and in some ways that'll help, I think, make the draft. If it turns out that we only get like 6 draft picks instead of 5, only add one. I think that we'll end up getting a couple more. I think we'll be in the 7 and 8 range, but whatever we get, tack TJ Hawkinson onto that because and
Mhm.
be happy about it because he is in the short time that he's been a Viking, he's been a very highly productive player, and I don't see any reason where that won't be the case in 2023 either.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. He has been good. I think he continues to improve. We've always said the old joke that you draft a tight end for your next team. He's on his next team, and he's doing outstanding at that. Uh, Drew had asked over on our Facebook group who's going to be the wide receiver two, and I answered TJ Hawkinson. He is right now, and until supplanted by somebody else, he will remain the wide receiver two for the Minnesota Vikings. It's he's that competent. He's that good. Is he the absolute best tight end in the league? No. Is he in the top 5? Oh yes. Oh yes, he is. So, and he's still young and doing nothing but improving. So I look forward to seeing him this season. Now, I didn't think. Well, go ahead.
No, just I think the one area where TJ Hawkinson, where we hope to see a bit more of a growth and improvement, and is that his yards per catch were a bit low last year. He caught a high volume of passes, but didn't generate a ton of yardage with that, which isn't unusual for a tight end. But would like to see him in 2023 be a bit more explosive and get some more explosive gains downfield, and get that yard per catch average well over the 10-yard
10-yard mark
yard average, because he was below that last year, and I think he's quite capable of doing that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
And being as he's our number 2 wide receiver, we're going to need him to get bigger chunk plays too for the offense to really hum like we'd want it to hum.
I agree. Now, we're still talking about the drafts. This was a pick, right? Our first pick of the season, or of 2023, was TJ Hawkinson last year, and we traded away those picks for him. I think it's probably the best so far. We are on top of winning the draft at this point. Hey, Dan, because we did him. Now there's other things we talked about, ways of getting picks. And this is trading players we currently have. The one we have right there is Dalvin Cook. Do you expect Dalvin Cook to be traded at draft time to get draft picks, to add to that 5?
I do expect him to get traded. I don't know, and I think I don't know if it's exactly a leak, but the reports coming out about how the surgery went well the past week and like he's better than ever. I think Tom Pelissero had a tweet about that earlier in the week. Like somebody let that through, so potentially to beef up Dalvin Cook's trade value, because clearly if the surgery didn't go well and he was still having problems with his shoulders, that's nobody's going to really be interested in trading for him particularly at his salary right now, his salary cap hit. But I think that I do expect him to get traded between now and the draft. What we get for him, like I read one story several weeks ago where I was saying where the Vikings could get, this was before free agency started, the Vikings could get like a Christian McCaffrey haul for Dalvin Cook. Well, I think that was nonsense then, and it's even more nonsense now, because just because of Cook's age, his salary cap hit, and the way he played last year. If you look at again some of the advanced metrics, he did not fare very well. A lot of the negative runs, was that all his fault? Was that the offensive line fault? I think it was a bit of both, but I don't think that you're going to get a whole lot for Dalvin Cook. I don't think you're going to get any. You're certainly not getting. I don't think you'll even get a day 2 pick for Dalvin Cook. But if you got a couple of day 3s, yeah. But if you got a couple of day 3s, based on how teams value NFL running backs these days, and the kind of haul you're getting for running backs these days, I think that would be the most we could expect, and I'd be okay with it.
Well, that's Dalvin.
Yeah.
Danielle Hunter has hit the rumor mill. There, I have him there. Not exactly the one I wanted, but that works. Danielle Hunter had hit the rumor mill as a possible trade item. What do you think of the Vikings possibly trading Danielle?
We talked about this a month and a half ago, where I was talking about where if the best trade chip the Vikings had, I thought was Danielle Hunter, but you kind of showed me a bit about like a lot of the cons to trading Hunter, which a lot of it was about salary cap, which was that we wouldn't he'd be on our books.
He'd be expensive.
Yeah. So I think that for that reason alone, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and I don't think he's going to get traded unless the Vikings somebody blew the doors off of for like really knocked Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa's socks off with the offer, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think he's going, and I think that as long as you can get the contract situation sorted out with Hunter, because he's underpaid for a top edge rusher right now. He's still got this year and maybe 2 or 3 more good years for you playing at a high level. And that's a lot more than you can say for a lot of players in the league. So I think that you need to keep him.
Well, and Ryan's mentioning here that his contract is tricky because he's not going to play for his current contract where he's only making $5 million this year. And that's the sticking point. Now, he is above that age range that Kwesi likes, that 26, 27-year-old. He's 29. Like I've said before, defensive ends usually last into their young 30s. They're still very productive. Will he be? We don't know. Will they keep him? We don't know. It will cost the Vikings quite a bit. Part of the trade will probably be negotiating who pays some of that. As of right now, it'd be the Vikings. They may want to pump that off, but he is probably the biggest fish in the barrel for trade if the Vikings are looking to go up, and it's going to be interesting to see if they do. The last one that we've talked about before is Za'Darius Smith. Will they trade Za'Darius Smith for draft picks?
I think that they will. That he's going to be another one that's going. I think that unless they trade Hunter, of course, but I think Smith is the more likely one. How much you're going to get from again, I don't know, because of his age. Injuries have slowed him down a bit the past couple of years, but if you trade for him, you're going to have to, based on his social media activity a month ago, you're going to also have to renegotiate his contract. I don't know how keen teams will be on that, but he's somebody that I think the Vikings are going to trade, and the fact that they signed Marcus Davenport gives them insurance that they've got somebody to step into his starting role if they do trade him and they keep Hunter. Then you'd have Hunter and Davenport.
They aren't exactly identical, but yes, they've got an edge rusher that can step in. So those are the folks I see as possible trade to get extra picks. Who knows? Kirk Cousins may be one if they trade, San Francisco and all that, blah, blah, blah. You've heard it all week. Who knows what happens there? It's going to be interesting to watch. And it's going to be fun because the coverage across the board, across the Viking sphere, I know Ted and Drew are doing their live thing. I look forward to seeing that and hopefully hopping on with them. We will not be live the whole time, but we will be reporting and hopping on as well. It's going to be a fun 3 days to see how your Minnesota Vikings do on this. Well, that ends theme 2 and brings us to theme 3. But to catch theme 3 will be podcast only. It'll come out Monday morning for your drive to work, and it's going to be the last of our segments of the State of the Vikings, and we're going to be looking at the special teams. And believe it or not, we've got quite a bit to talk about, Darren and I, on the special teams, and can Coach Matt Daniels take them up and make them better than they were last year. There was times last year they were outstanding, and then there was times that they weren't. And then, we had the whole Greg Joseph and his consistency issue. But to find out what we say, you're going to have to subscribe to the Vikings First and Skol podcast network, if you want to call it that. You can find it on any of your favorite aggregators, podcast aggregators. It will be a podcast-only show, and it will be on Monday morning. It'll be up and ready for you as you drive to work, as you're taking in that first cup of coffee, right? Whatever you'd like, you can consume it then, but it'll be Monday. And so that was the teaser. We need to see why we're doing this, folks, is we need to up our subscription to our podcasts. It's how Darren and I get our beer money. And we've been parched, and we need a little bit more beer money. But we need to get it up. We need to grow. Since we are new as Vikings First and Skol, we need to rebuild our base back up, and we'd appreciate you doing that. And so we're going to offer some podcast-only episodes. And this will happen through the week, too. Don't knock Tyler out of this either. Tyler will be doing his normal Real Forno show live here on Monday. We'll do a live show on Wednesday. But most everything, unless it's serious breaking news and the world's coming to the end or the Vikings just traded Kirk Cousins, we will be doing podcast only. So we need to bring that up. We appreciate you subscribing to Vikings First and Skol on whatever podcast aggregator you use. iTunes, Google, Chat, or whatever it is. All the different ones that are out there, we're out there. If you can't find it, send me a message, and I will guarantee we'll get it on whatever one you use so we can have you listen to it. G-Mac ain't touching no alligator. That's funny. Now, I want to know if anybody can tell me what this symbol is right here. Whose logo is this? If you could tell me in the deal, I'll do a commissioned art piece for you.
It ain't going to be me. I have no idea what it is.
And have you got any last things to say there, Darren?
I think you talked a bit about the trade candidates, Dave, and I think that's really going to be the remaining intrigue, a lot of it for me in the next few weeks, because people talking about who the Vikings are going to draft and are they going to trade up or trade down. I like reading about it and I like hearing people's thoughts on it, but I don't think anybody really knows what the fuck that the Vikings are going to do, really. And I don't think anybody outside of the Vikings room really has any idea who they are really honing in on. But the trade stuff, that's something that they got to start. I think they got to start doing some of that work in the next couple of weeks to get those extra picks and know what they've got as far as draft capital going into the draft. So maybe we will see, I'm hoping, or not hoping, but it'll be interesting to see if at least one of those trades is made here in the next couple of weeks, and giving the little Vikings a little bit of some more draft picks heading into the draft, which I think would also help Kwesi Adofo-Mensah further refine his draft strategy going into April 27th and the 29th. Mm-hmm. If you got 7 picks and they're in round, you got those extra 2 picks were in round 4 and round 5, or round 5 and round 6, I think that'll help him even more refine his strategy and how he's going to attack the draft than if he just has the 5 that he currently has.
I agree wholeheartedly. We've had a bunch of good guesses so far. Nobody's got it right. Oh my God. My worthless opinion. You've got to be a member. Contact me, send me a message via Twitter or wherever, and tell me what piece of artwork you would like created. You are 100% correct. It is the symbol for the Whiskey Tribe. And I'm impressed, my worthless opinion. My hat's off to you. Tip to you. Good job. Outstanding.
That didn't take long.
I know. And my worthless opinion hit it dead on. You rock there, buddy. I appreciate that. And like I said, hit me up on Facebook or Twitter and tell me who you'd like to see in art. Something like that. And I'll work on something for you in what little time period I have. So that brings us to the end of the show. I want to thank everybody for watching us. And remember, download Vikings First and Skull podcasts. And then on Monday morning, be ready to listen to Theme 3 as we get into State of the Vikings, the special teams. What do we say, Darren?
We say Skull Vikings, baby. Thanks, everybody, for jumping on and listening and commenting.
Yep. Skull Vikings! Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and Skull. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. Skull, everybody!